if you don't like doing this kind of work, it's really hard to get motivated to do it. We don't want to be insignificant as human beings. We want to bring value. We want to feel value. How do we train on the job? What can people learn on the job? What do they need to bring to the job? What strengths do they need to bring to the job so that we can train them? People have those right skill sets and interests. Most importantly, they've got their personality and their interests have got to be aligned with the job.
This week, we sat down with Julie MacFarland, the author of the Talent Acquisition Essentials Guidebook. And we spoke with her about talent acquisition, including this slippery idea of fit and what that really means. We talked about how to remove biases from the process of talent acquisition through avoiding the story that you want to tell yourself and relying on rigorous structure, including data and evidence-based process to acquire talent in the right ways. Great conversation with a wonderful person, a good thinker, and in a very critical area. Enjoy. This is where I wanted to center our conversation.
Okay.
So you did everybody the favor of not only building few decades worth of experience, but also structuring all of that experience, putting it down, codifying it. And why did you think that that was important rather than, I don't know, just sort of gathering a handful of understudies around yourself and kind of doing it the apprentice way? It's not easy. It's time expensive and energy expensive to write a book.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's interesting. It's been a journey. I did a lot of the apprentice, as you can imagine. I had a team of recruiters that I worked with at Mercy Health that I was constantly training. Interns, I was constantly training. And all this stuff was really basically, a lot of it was in my head, and, did I ever have time to write it down? No, I was doing the job. It was just like, we have to get going. How do we go about doing it? I used a lot of tools that I had for training managers, but really didn't have anything for the talent acquisition professional. I worked for Mercy Health for 20 years, and we started this evidence-based selection process using a data-driven approach. And that got national attention. The guy that I was working with was a consultant that worked with our CHRO at the time to actually get this off the ground, this data-driven approach, which was actually just pretty much life-changing for us in talent acquisition. And it allowed us to really start to look at people as individuals and letting the data provide the validation of why somebody was a good candidate for a job rather than our own impressions, because we have a lot of noise and bias that gets in the way of our thoughts that we don't even realize is happening. And that was a big part of what goes on, even though we think we're trying really hard, even in HR, trying to be fair, consistent. We know what the laws are. What are we trying to do? We still get that noise and bias. We can't help it. We're human beings. So how do we keep that at a minimum and really focus on the candidate to ensure that they really are the best fit for the job? Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're after. And so anyhow, we started this approach. We started working on this in 2010 and launched it in 2011 and proceeded to learn a lot along the way as we were developing this. And we actually, through time and like over 10,000 data points, we're able to actually support that. This absolutely lowered our turnover rate, lowered our length of time to fill, and it more than doubled our diversity. And all we were doing was using data. We weren't doing anything specific, especially when it came to the diversity, because so many people were like, well, what are you doing? Like, where are you doing? How are you getting people? It's like, we quit doing all that stuff. What we did is we started looking at people as individuals, realized how many biases really got in the way, and all the good people that we were letting really letting people get away from us because of the stories that we would tell. So basically we launched this program and had these results that just were incredible. We got recognition at the White House for it. My boss at the time, different boss, because my previous boss had passed away, but my boss was invited to the White House, traveled all over the United States talking about using this data-driven approach, because it was like something unique and different that was being used, especially for building diversity, in your company. So but basically I worked there. I had the opportunity to start their career development center using the same assessment tools to try to use data to help people find that right job fit. But then I was offered an opportunity with the guy that I was telling you about that was a consultant. His name is Bill Guest, and he owns Metrics Reporting. And he asked me to join him as a talent acquisition consultant simply because they had received grant money from some local philanthropists, the Kellogg Foundation and the DeVos Foundation, and they wanted to scale what we were using at this evidence-based approach across West Michigan. So, several $1 million were invested in getting this off the ground. But what they were getting it started, they started in 2018. But what they were running into is that they didn't have, they started building in 2008. The academy or the first cohort started in 2019. And they had done it. They were doing it from the data-driven approach, but they hadn't had somebody that actually did it. They needed a talent acquisition person. So he asked me to do it. So I was offered an early retirement incentive at Mercy. So timing was perfect. So I started working for Bill the end of 2019. I left Mercy and became the talent acquisition consultant. Well, in January, he told me I needed to write a book. And I'm like, me write a book? I don't write books. What do you mean write a book? It totally blew me away that I would write a book. And he said, we need something for our employers to use for how to do, because what they found, there are a lot of talent acquisition teams out there, HR departments that had no idea how to do recruiting. And I had learned so much along the way and worked with just an incredible mentor in Tom Carroll that I just, I really had a lot of opportunities. Plus I had, years and years of experience and things that I learned along the way, a lot of things the hard way. And so I started writing that book during COVID. That was what I did during COVID. I was working with, as a consultant, but my role was really to get this, it's basically a guidebook to be used in our academy. For selection and hiring. So that was why I wrote it. So a long-winded way of explaining what landed me to writing that book. It wasn't anything I ever thought about doing, but it was such a great experience for me because it was a chance for me to really, dive deep in my own brain and see what did I know? And how many people get a chance to really put it on paper, what they've learned through the years. I mean, everything that I put in there comes from multiple employers. It wasn't just one experience, it's been different things that I've learned along the way and pulled it in. And then I did a lot of validation and research online and talking to other people to be able to, validate what I thought. And what I was writing in that book is really, to me, this is the best way to do it. Is it realistic for everybody? No. And so what parts and pieces work for you as an organization, what would be best for you? But, and we didn't do everything to that. I developed things in there that I wish we would have done as a team, but I never had time to do. And so it's really was kind of like thinking about all the TA people that worked with me. If I wish I would have had something to be able to train them for all those years, they just had to listen to me, take notes and, do the best that we could in that apprenticeship type role. But, it was like, you're doing it as you're going. And we never had time. We were like I used to say, a fast moving train going down the track, trying to stay on the track and learn as we're going, but throwing things at them as we're going. And, we had a lot, we hired a lot. We were very, very busy. And it was just really, really surreal for me to be able to write something that I could pull together and then actually have something to share with other people to be able to use, like I say, where they see fit, what's going to be the best, what pieces really make sense for them. So
I'm so pleased that you said the word fit, because one of the things that I note throughout here is in your domain, there are a lot of words that people adjacent to that domain. So not the people who live and breathe it every day, but the people who are on the candidate side or on the hiring team side or, downstream of it. They're not really certain what the terms always mean. And fit has to be one of those. Fit is this mysterious word that gets used and abused, et cetera, et cetera. Can you just maybe say a few words from somebody with the depth, what is really meant by that? What's the correct kind of deployment of that word?
Oh, absolutely. That the person that we're looking at, because to me, it's a two-way street when it comes to the candidate. It's not just about the employer, and it's not just about putting a body in a job, which is what happens, unfortunately, especially when people are really stressed about finding, they have an opening, they're stressed about it, they need to find somebody. But finding the wrong person is not the right answer. And my years of experience working in this, and also having personal experience being in a job that was the wrong fit, I have a lot of passion around that, especially around that word. When you are not the right job fit, that this job is not right for you. When I'm talking about your knowledge, your skills, your ability, your strengths, your interest. If you don't like doing this kind of work, it's really hard to get motivated to do it. And having worked in HR in my career, and I've been a generalist, so I actually saw a lot of the disciplinary results of putting people in the wrong jobs. And I used to say all the time to my team, I said, they're in the wrong job, they're in the wrong job, they're in the wrong job, it's the wrong job. That long before I knew about this data stuff, and so what this was like, so I was so excited to see that when we started using this approach. Okay, at first I will tell you, I never thought people would take assessments the way that we needed them to be able to discover what their strengths were, but I was wrong, 100% wrong. And
Right.
they did not, they wanted to, they actually appreciated it, because many told me that, we weren't just hiring anybody, especially nurses, that we were open to, if we cared that much about bringing in the right people, then they wanted to work for an organization that hired the right people, because that meant their team players were going to be comparable to who they were, that they cared about what they were doing, and that we weren't just hiring a body. Nobody wants to be we don't want to be insignificant as human beings. We want to bring value. We want to feel value. And I don't care what level job that is, whether it's entry level or, the C-suite, you want to feel value. And so it's being able to recognize that every single job, if it's in a company or organization, then obviously it's important, or it would have been cut. It just wouldn't be there. And so you need to value that, and you need to understand what it is, what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need for that particular role. And people bring that to life. It's a two-way street. So it's the job fit that comes from people being aligned with what the job are. If you think about jobs, it's people, their personalities too. They have interest aligned with them. And I never thought about it like that till I started learning the things that were part of the tools that we were using in our data-driven approach. But it really, truly made so much sense to me. It really resonated with me. And I finally knew why I was in HR. I mean, I liked HR, but I could never really tell you why I was in HR. It's just that I was in a job that I hated, working for a bank, working as a financial customer service person, that I had to help people with their checking accounts and find the missing money. And it's like, oh my gosh, I hate this job. And I watched my whole self change in that time frame. In 4 weeks, I became a person I didn't even know. I never had an attitude. I had an attitude. I hated going to work. I hated every part of my life. We had moved to another state. I was miserable. I've never been so miserable in my life. And that job just added to it. And so I fortunately got a job in HR after 4 weeks. And I've never looked back, because I thought I am never going to be in a position again where I hate my job as much as I hated that job at the bank. It's not that the job at the bank is a bad job. For the right people, it's a great job. But for me, it was the wrong job. And I know why it was the wrong job. And I know my interests are not aligned with it. My strengths are not aligned with it. And so therefore, it was a very hard job for me to do, because I constantly had to do what we call behavior modification to be able to be successful in that role. And that's what draws on people. And that's what starts to create those negative attitudes. That's what impacts our ability to get out of bed, to go to work. It's what affects us to be, being flexible when there's change or there's conflict at work. We have no patience for it, because we're already at the end of our rope, because we hate what we're doing. So, and having hired so many people through the years and talked to so many people through the years, I just know we're human beings, and this is true. We were fortunate to live in a country where we can actually, that it does matter that we have choices, and that we can try to find the right fit. And so if you can help people to find where they belong, which is why I'm such a component for career navigation, to really try to help people discover that first before they get in a company, but also working with companies to make sure that they understand and how do they get the right job fit right out the gate, because they save millions of dollars. We save so much money at Mercy Health because our turnover reduced, because we were actually, bringing in the right people and getting them on the right career path so that they could actually move up through the organization and stay.
I want to take you back to assessments, because you said something quite interesting from a position already of pretty deep experience, well-polished intuitions. You thought no one would take these assessments. So what was it that you thought that they would have an allergy to?
Oh, just the timing, like they could get a job anywhere. Why would they bother coming in? We were at the time using work keys. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not, but they had to be done in person. Those were put out there by ACT. And those were really popular in like the mid 2000s. And I just didn't think nurses would go in person to take a 3-hour assessment. I just didn't. Why would they go there when we have other really good healthcare organizations around us in the community? Why would they come to us and go for a 3-hour assessment? Never thought they would, because you think you know it all from your experience. Well, what I learned from that is that you know what, we are always learning and there's always opportunities to learn more. So, you just better, and I was so wrong. I was wrong on every single level. I was shocked. I could not believe that they came. But what we learned is that we had to engage with our candidates first. We had to make sure that we were talking to them and having them understand the why, and that we valued them from day one. So you need to start building that candidate relationship as soon as they apply with you. You need to, or the first time you're talking to them, if they haven't applied, it's that candidate relationship is what's so key. And that's why they came, because we tried it with just sending, an email and an automatic thing. You need to show up here and do it. Nobody showed up. Nobody came, not one person. Didn't matter whether it was a nurse or a entry-level worker. Nobody came to take the assessment. So we immediately course corrected and started contacting, did a screening interview. Like we would screen the applications and then we would contact those people we were interested in and invite them to come and take the assessments and explain the why. And then we had hundreds of people showing up. That's all it took, was that candidate engagement from the beginning. And so to me, what I used to always say too, the process itself helps to bring in the right people, because the people willing to go through it are the ones that are showing you that there's an interest. So it's a screening tool all on its own if they're willing to actually follow your process. So, and that was right out the gate in 2011. We learned that like immediately. We had our first session for assessments, and when nobody came, we course corrected immediately and started that engagement call. And then we never had a problem after that. Not everybody has to do that today. We're using a different system, and they don't have to come in person. It's electronic. So a lot of people, we tell them, and people are used to doing some assessments, especially if they're online. So we don't, companies don't have to do that engagement like they did, like we had to, because of the going in person. But again, you got to weigh that out. If you're having, you can't, some companies do that, some companies don't. It just depends. And see, that's some of the stuff that I do in the consulting, working with different companies that are learning how to do evidence-based selection. So what I do is with this higher reach, which is the name of the evidence-based selection process that we're calling it for these grant-funded programs. I'm actually helping them to scale it. So we have like a 6-month academy where they're learning about what it means to be. We learn about noise and bias. We teach them about that. We do job grouping to map their jobs to, I don't know if you're familiar with the ONET or not. Are you familiar with the ONET?
No, tell me.
Okay, the ONET is the world's largest job database that's out there, and it's put out there by the federal government. So it's actually, and it has the knowledge, skills, and abilities and interests, and it belongs to it's really the foundational and occupational competencies that you need to have for a job. And so we have mapped, our assessments are mapped to those jobs on the ONET. And from in there, they are actually, so you're comparing apples to apples. That's what sets our assessments apart from other assessments, are the fact that we're able to align it to jobs. And it works. Believe me, I've been using it for years. I've been using it since 2007 when I learned about it. And I had no idea that this was out there, and that it's paid for by it's paid for by our tax dollars. So it's out there. It's the world's, like I say, the world's largest database, job database, and it's all aligned with the world of work map. So we're using all these different things to align people. They're put together through what they call job families, and there's a lot of jobs that have similar competencies. So when you think about your strengths, what do you need to have in strengths? When you're talking about different, you think about customer service. There's so many different types of customer service jobs, and if you read different job descriptions, it's going to give you a variety of different tasks that are associated. But when you start to really put together, at the end of the day, we're pretty much looking for people that have these strengths. So you hear in today's world, we're talking a lot about skills-based hiring. And a lot of people can't find what they're looking for because the job market has become much tighter than it used to be. So therefore, how do we train, to your point, how do we train on the job? What can people learn on the job? What do they need to bring to the job? What strengths do they need to bring to the job so that we can train them for this job? That not just don't just bring somebody in because they're not working, and let's train them to be a carpet layer when it's not the right fit for them. Maybe they hate that kind of stuff. Maybe they don't like working with their hands. Maybe they're not good at that. They're not good at measuring. You need to have certain competencies that, and you've got to like doing that kind of stuff. Do they like being on their knees? Are they going to like going to different places every day to do different work? These are all things that you have to take into account when you're talking to somebody about a job, because those are the reasons why they don't come in. I worked in the temporary business for a while, and I learned that a lot. The environment was very, very important to the people that we were talking to. So we did a lot of tours so that we understood that, so we could explain that. But that's just a side note. But But just making sure people have those right skill sets and interest. Most importantly, they've got their personality and their interests have got to be aligned with the job. And what I did find, we also were measuring cognitive ability and found out, another bias thing that's in there. People are smarter than we gave them credit for. And so, I really thought that it would have adverse impact to provide somebody with to have somebody actually take the cognitive assessments, but it actually had the opposite. People did much better. That it didn't really even help us from a data standpoint because they were doing what they needed to do for the job. So cognitive became like not the important one. It was the personality that became, oh my gosh, that's really the driver. And that's an individual thing. And you're learning so much about that person when you have an assessment that really measures their strengths so that you can actually see where they really fit with that particular role. And like I say, the ONAT aligns all this stuff for us. So we actually have a system that, maps it right to it. So we give people in our career navigation work, we actually give people their top 15 job families that they're aligned to on the ONAT so that they can actually see, that could be, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different occupations, but it's similar. They're similar in knowledge, skills, abilities, interest, their strengths, that type of thing. There's a lot of jobs that are similar. So it really helps in today's world of work challenges with that skills-based hiring approach.
In that job families, I suppose it's kind of a logic. There's an underlying logic in job families. You
Yes.
track certain similarities. Is it too easy an idea for an aspiring company looking to acquire talent to say, look, our job description fits nicely within this family, therefore the pool should be collected from those who are from already jobs within this family? Is that too quick a move? Is that too simple a maneuver?
That's exactly what it is. And that's what we do in the academy. We teach people how to do job grouping. We do job grouping with them. And Jofi assessments are the assessments that we use. And they're actually, they're the experts on the job mapping. I can do it. I've done it a lot. I've mapped a lot of jobs, but, I don't consider myself the expert. I consider the Jofi people the experts, but they can really help you to identify. Sometimes it's a combination because there's like 1,100 job families on the ONET. And you think about how many jobs are out there, but yet there's so many different job titles for basically the same type of skills. So when you think about somebody putting an ad out there to look for somebody, what they put out there with the, what do you have to have? What are those main functions that you have to be able to do? You start looking at the ONET and those things are in there. We were doing one yesterday with a company trying to map their job for, it happened to be a university, and they were looking to map their financial aid person to one of the ONET codes. Well, we found something under counselor. And if you read what the tasks are, there were definite mentions of working with financial aid. So it really fell in that one, even though it didn't seem like it, because but at the end of the day, this is not the job description. We're trying to align it for strengths. What are the competencies? What are the interests? And it's all, like I say, it's all about the data. It's down to the decimal points as far as mapping and using our assessments that align with that so that it can actually show you how many. We actually use a star rating. How many stars are they when it comes to this particular job? So I learned very quickly at Mercy, a 3, 4, or 5-star candidate was going to be a really good fit for a job that I would be successful with that. Don't go the 2-star candidates. They were way too off. It never worked out. They were either terminated or they quit because they just couldn't do the job. So we use the star rating, and so what they get are they can measure it that way and see what the star rating is. But what I will say, somebody that's a 3-star rating, it's not probably the best fit for them. You can see other jobs within your organization that might be a better fit, like a 4 or 5-star, which is some of the work that I'm doing as a consultant, working with companies to help them to see where are their current staff, where would they be a better fit within the organization. So for retention purposes, as well as engagement for the employees, to see, let's build a career path for you within the organization. And maybe you can't go there today, but at least know where your sights are set. Because you hear all the time about people using a stepping stone job to get from one place to the next. Well, they got to know what that stepping stone job is. What does it look like? Is this the right one? Where am I going to step to? Rather than just have a job, but am I going to step to the right job, or do I need to sidestep and go another direction? And, that's all what career pathing is about. But this helps with that too.
So there's something that I want to ask. When people knew I would be speaking with you, they were saying, one of the trickiest problems to know is how long do you give it before you know whether you did right or wrong in your selection?
Oh, well,
So you said, it never works out. You said on the 2 of 5s, it never works out. And that implies that there's a point of time where maybe it looked like it might, or, it did for a bit.
I would say
the
first 90 days seemed to be the sweet spot, for that. We always did what we called, we looked at our terminations every month, and we did a review of all the people that were terminated that were hired in the first year, and we wanted to see, okay, where are the opportunities to learn from our process? What could we tweak, do differently? What were the aha moments? Were we really following the process? And I had multiple recruiters, so it was difficult because, they felt we had to handle it very carefully so that they didn't feel like we were, attacking them, but it was really an opportunity for us to learn. And I did it too, because I hired too. And, but we looked at the terminations, and the people that were in that first 90 days tended to go back to that star rating. And there were things that were in the assessments that told us not to hire them. There were things in our interview that told us not to hire, but because we had to get somebody in the job, we ignored it, because it was more important to get the body in the job rather than getting the right person in the job. But that's why I used to always say, they come in the front door to go out the back door. When they're not the right fit, they're not going to stay. And if they don't like that job, they're going to know, like I did in the bank. I knew, like in the first week, it was the wrong job for me. I lasted 4 weeks, and I got worse and worse and worse. I mean, I hated walking in there. I just hated walking in. And it didn't take me more than a couple of days to feel that way. So I think it's pretty immediate. You can tell right away. Are they engaged with the work that they're learning? Do they even care, the person that's training them? I mean, are they taking notes? Are you starting to see right away? I mean, it is so, you can't behavior modify something that you hate that much for long.
Yeah.
If it's really not the right job, you're going to know right away. So
I'd say to the mean. Yeah.
It doesn't take long.
Yeah. You mentioned Jofi assessments, and those are rooted on Big 5
yes,
personality.
Big 5 personality, right?
Yeah, but it's not as simple as they just are Big 5 personality. There's more to it.
Right.
I don't think I can ask you to go out to full deep water and tell us everything about Jofi, because there's layers of complexity to that assessment model. But for the uninitiated, can you maybe just say 1 or 2 words about why that's a uniquely effective tool?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can totally appreciate what you're saying, but we have the Big 5, but under the Big 5, there's the 15 facets that are aligned with that. So if you look at, for example, agreeableness, you're going to see compassion, you're going to see cooperative, and you're going to see helpful. And you get a score for each one of those. And this is what's aligned to the jobs on the ONET. So when we get this scorecard, when we're hiring somebody, it shows us what's important for that particular job. So it's actually, it actually stars it. And then it also puts boxes around what's important, where you need to be on that particular one for that job. And then what we do as talent acquisition professionals, we look at the areas that we would consider red flags. So if somebody really needs to be compassionate in a job, like they needed to at Mercy Health, it's healthcare. You got to care about the patients. You can't not care, and you believe how many people try to do that for the wrong reasons, because it's a job. I can get in here, but they don't really care about the patients. And, that's, we have to put, why are we there? The patients is at the center of everything that all of us do, everything that everybody was doing, no matter whether it was direct patient care or not in your role. But so we would, if somebody was, rather than just look at the score and say black and white, we're not going to hire you, we use behavior-based interview questions that we have a Jofi structured interview guide, and I actually wrote the questions that are tied to all the competencies, the facets. And so you can come up with your own, but I gave 4 examples for each one of those 15 facets. So they can probe that further and say, okay, how do you behavior modify when it's necessary for you to be compassionate? So asking for, describe a time when that was a compassionate answer, so that as a professional, I can rate that answer and put that into my overall score sheet for we have what we call compensatory scoring to go along with the star rating. So we have the assessments, we use the interview, we also can use references, and you can use other things. Well, the more information that you have to put in a final score, the more accurate it's going to be. So we use references. the assessments and then our interview with the structured, interview questions that were tied to the competencies. But it's all about behavior modification. That's really the key to this whole thing. How do we behavior modify in those areas that are not our strengths? And you might have somebody that's way too far to the right, like if, say, for a leader in agreeableness, if they're way to the right, they're high in compassion, high in cooperative, high in helpful, they are never going to be a leader in a way that we need them to be, because they're too they worry too much. They don't want to ever deliver bad news. They never can take a hard stand. They don't lead. They don't, people need somebody to be able to do that for them. That's why they have a team, and they have to constantly behavior modify. And it's not that it hurts usually people love working for people like that because they're so nice. However, it can cause a lot of problems because they don't like to deliver bad news. So they have a lot of anxiety. And it really does play a role and it takes its toll on them, and they have a really hard time with it. So those are really usually not the best fit. And I was looking at all that when I was looking for leadership at Mercy. I was looking at their emotional stability. I was looking at their agreeableness just to kind of see. But so that was where we learned how to use the behavioral based interview questions tied to the competencies in the areas that we would consider red flag, whether it was too far to the right, too far to the left. It was more like about a bell curve, and not to say that too far to the right was bad, because it wasn't. It just depended on the combination and what was important for that particular job, so you have to go back to job fit. And it didn't mean that there's no right, wrong, or good or bad. It's what's the best job fit. So, and that's what changes this. It's not like when people talk about what are my weaknesses, that doesn't even exist in this terminology. We talk about how do you behavior modify, what's less pronounced in your personality, what's less pronounced. So we don't even talk about weaknesses.
What is the role in your approach, in what you're describing? Who do you draw on across the organization to participate in this process? So you've got strangers, you got people outside of the tent, and you build a pool of them. And then at some point, they start to interact with insiders. And maybe that's an interview, or maybe that's in writing, or that can be a variety of ways. What have you learned about who from that inside circle can or must participate in those conversations?
Well, when you're talking about the selection, actual final selection of candidates, is that what you mean? As
I actually mean all the way up and down, because as I look at our clients, and more of the world of training and workplace learning touches your world of talent acquisition than I ever guessed. Like, just in this conversation, I'm seeing connections all through.
Yes. Oh, there is.
But many people will interact with this person should they join, and you can really poison the chalice for them, because here they come, they've joined, and Jim over here is holding a grudge against them because Jim was never part of the selection, or John is overly protective and helicoptering because John was part of the selection, or what have you. Anyway,
that you're bringing up a lot of different things that come into play. And for one, okay, let's break it down into selection first. Who you have as part of the interviewing team is really crucial. And too many people just put anybody and everybody that are not qualified to be part of that. I had a lot of experience with that, specifically at Mercy Health, talking about panel interviews and all the people that had to be part of something that, if you read anything about best practices, that is absolutely not the way to hire. And, it's like you have who are the key stakeholders that need to be involved, and controlling that and making sure that the right people are interviewing, and most importantly, that they are trained and they understand what in the world you're looking for, A, and B, that they know how to conduct a legal interview, that they're not, going down those tangents of things that don't make sense. I had an experience once with a candidate that she was internal, but it was with employees. The staff wanted to interview her for a supervisor job. Oh my gosh, they annihilated her. She ended up quitting, leaving the organization. I still feel bad about that to this day. And so I learned that HR had to be present in those kind of interviews because it was so dysfunctional. And technically the staff shouldn't be interviewing because they don't know how to interview. So what I moved a lot of things to were what we called a meet and greet. So it wasn't more about interviewing, it was more about, let's talk about the strengths and you talk about yourself, but making it informal and not a formal interview process. The people that I had it broken down into, and it's in my book too, but I have it broken down into the hiring manager who comes next. Then it would be the stakeholders. Who are those key people that, their work is really going to be impacted by these different departments that they work with. So who are those stakeholders and how do you control that? And then finally, the team, or people that would benefit from a meet and greet. They don't have to be part of the interview, but let's meet the person before we bring them in. And we would gather feedback, but not to the level that we would if it was an interview. And secondly, controlling what that interview looked like. And the one thing that I learned is that behavioral-based interviewing does not belong to people that are not trained. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to measure the competency. And so what they end up doing is they rate the story rather than the competency. And so it came down to, and I, again, learned all this stuff the hard way, but, managers would say to me, they had a great story. It's like, well, it's not about the story. It's like, can they be a team player? What did you learn about that? So I really moved to scenario situational based type questions because that was something that the manager could actually evaluate. Because really, when we partner with the manager, we want to make sure that they have the critical thinking skills to be able to do the job. Can they train them? They want to get to know them. So taking a different approach to that interview and having them actually give, how would they handle this situation? How do they go about, like if it's a cook, how do they go about managing the line and what do they do? How do they prioritize? How do they manage all the orders coming out them? What do they actually do? Or talk about a time when you had a lot of things. So I would work with the managers to actually come up with the scenario questions ahead of time so that they were asking everybody the same thing. And then it became more something that they could actually evaluate because they couldn't evaluate those behavioral based questions. Not saying all of them couldn't, but a lot of them could not. So it became very difficult for us to manage to really see where people were coming from because of that. So getting people engaged, again, the candidates got to be engaged, but the people on the interviewing team need to be engaged. You need to understand the right reasons and working closely with the hiring manager. That hiring manager relationship is crucial and making sure that that's set up from the get-go, that we understand what that looks like and who are those key people. I found a lot of our leadership, they were inviting people because they thought so-and-so invited all the people to their interview thing. So now we have to invite, and it was just like one-upping each other. And when it came to nursing, oh my gosh, you would not believe all the people that had to be involved in a nurse manager interview. It was just incredible. And then they would do the group think, which was another problem. They couldn't be doing I wanted individual feedback, not the group think, because people are intimidated by other people. And, are they really giving their honest opinion? So, you got somebody forcing it on them. They had to, so I didn't want a group think. I wanted an individual response. So, but that's one thing. The other thing is so say we've brought them on board and they're coming in as part of a team. You're right. And this is where this assessment can be used for, as I mentioned, career navigation. It can also be used for team building. It can also be used for, this is what we're calling it in our consulting thing is right now. We're trying to come up with a word, but engagement and retention. And what we're working with a company right now that we took a pilot group of employees in a certain department, and all of them, there are multiple managers, and the staff took the assessments and the managers, and we did an hour career coaching with these individual people. And we mapped them all to the different jobs within the company for their star rating that we actually had mapped to Jofi. And so we showed them where they fit within the organization. And so these were their strengths. So we could see that when I mentioned somebody that's a 3-star, they can do the job. They're doing the job. It's just that there is a better job for them within that. And that's what we were discovering. There were other places that they would be a better fit. So we can provide this information to the director, but also to the individual, because then they can see for career pathing. But the other thing, and we have another partner that works with us, he can come in and do the team building part where they actually take the results of this is what the team has to offer. Like I took all the assessments, I categorized them by the different job facets, for interest and personality, and showed that like their top number one competency in this company is compassion. And the next one's creative. And does that make sense? But compassion could maybe become a problem at times because almost everybody is strong in compassion. It's one of their top 5 strengths. So that's why everybody was so nice to us. We were doing, doing the coaching, but it also, too much of something good can always maybe lead to different challenges. And the same way with, the creativity, there's a lot of people that were really strong and creative, but they're not being able to use their creativeness. So therefore they're getting bored on the job, and this causes, people to leave. So this is where you can kind of see, but then when you see within the team, and this is what we're recommending to this company now, is to work with this gentleman to be able to see where the team understands each other. They understand the team dynamics, which absolutely says, okay, these people are like this is what they can bring. This is what I bring. This is what, as together, we are, one strong team, because we all aren't bringing the same thing. We might all be doing the same job, but we have different strengths that we bring to that team. And it's understanding what that looks like.
Correct me if I'm connecting things that are not a connection you intend. But you said something very interesting right at the outset, which was, well, two things, Julie. You said that you're very interested in individuals, and that a data-driven, evidence-based drive got you to start seeing people as true individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also mentioned that in certain cases you doubled the diversity. And so
right.
I'm picking up on some of what you're describing around how your system, your approach helps you isolate something like an overabundance of compassion, which on the face of it is a virtue, but in sort of a 90% saturation stops being a virtue and starts becoming a liability.
Right.
Is that what you mean by the diversity? You mean like this?
Well, with diversity, I mean, what I'm talking about with diversity is there's a lot of noise and bias in our hiring, in ours that we do as individuals, whether it's brought into us by the way we were brought up, where we went to school, our friends, our peers, it just depends. I mean, we're influenced by so many different things, and that gets in the way. So we tell our stories as far as what we think people are going to be like. For example, taking away, just not even looking at, race, just look at, I had companies, especially when I worked in the staffing industry, but, they didn't like anybody that went to a certain school, like they because you get caught up in the rivalry of Michigan State and U of M. That was a big deal in Michigan. And I had clients that didn't want to hire anybody that was a Michigan fan. It's like, because they were a U of M fan, it's just like, really? This is, you're going to go away from competency because of who they choose to, or where they went to school, because they went to Michigan State versus U of M. I mean, that's the way some people get, though, with these rivalries, when it comes to sports. And it's like, that should have nothing to do with it. I mean, we tend to, people tend to hire people that are like them. And that's not always the best way to hire. It's not the best way to hire. You need to base it on job fit, because you need diversity within your own team, so that you have different strengths, because nobody has like a black and white job description. There's always different things that come at it. So it helps to understand, like I mentioned, the creativity for that team. How can you need creativity to keep going? You can't do you've got the black and white of a job, but where does creativity fall into this to keep it moving, so that you don't get stuck and, not keeping up with the times and that type of thing. So, it's really, how do you harness that strength and use it to your advantage? Now, when it comes to diversity, what was happening is that, we just tell our stories as far as we think, we think that this is not going to work because this person's of a certain race or color. And that does not necessarily mean it's true, but we tell our stories. So I have a good example of one. It doesn't have to do with race necessarily, but with just an individual at a company that went through our Higher Reach Academy. And this guy actually told this story at our last users group meeting, which was in March. And he's the director of HR. He's been using the evidence-based approach for a few years now. And he said, there was somebody that he was basically telling on himself, but he said there's an individual that it kept playing for a leadership role. And there were things about her that I just felt like she was not the right fit for leadership. So I kept passing on her. So finally she continued to apply. And so he decided to let her go through the process and have her take the assessments. So he did. And lo and behold, guess what? She was a 5-star candidate for leadership. And so the one little thing that bugged him about her became this mountain. And in reality, that was something that he could manage. It wasn't that big a deal. And so he did put her through the process. She did get hired and promoted into a leadership role. She's doing a phenomenal job. And she's been doing it for about a year now. And he's like, and I missed out on somebody that worked for us that didn't give up, because I was letting my own bias get in the way over this one little thing that, that's still there. but we were able to overcome that and work with that, and she was able to behavior modify. So that was not an issue in her leadership responsibilities. And he told me I could share that story because I said, that is just phenomenal. And the fact that he was willing to, talk about it and say, yes, this absolutely did happen. I was just very, very intrigued by it. So.
Well, I can share, I think, from both my own personal perspective and being in a seat to advise people in a similar role where you always doubt and wonder whether or not you're going to select the right people to take those roles, because it's not like you have a leadership role for everyone.
Right.
And you ideally don't take them lightly. You don't just pick a favorite, but you hope you get it. And there's like a little fellow on this shoulder whispering in your ear saying, it might not be the one that you think. And so when you tell that story, I automatically can feel that synapse firing. That there are these characters where you're like, I can't put my finger on it, but that might be the dark horse that absolutely, takes it. It's a very encouraging story, that one.
It really is. And I will tell you, that's what happens to us. And that's why this process works so well, because it takes that doubt away. You're validating your selection. You're validating why you're doing different things, because you're not just basing it on you. You're using data to help with that. You're using data to drive that decision making. Did you ever see the movie Moneyball?
Yes. I've been thinking about Moneyball the whole time we've been speaking.
This is everything. This is what it's based on, is Moneyball.
Yeah.
It's totally based on Moneyball, using the data-driven approach.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Sorry. So this is one of the points of challenge that I wanted to put up to you and see if you have a solution for this. The Moneyball story works, and a lot of the scenarios you've shared have worked at a certain scale. What have you seen, and what's your direction to organizations that can't afford systems? They don't have large enough scale or size where the data would be that relevant. The roles they're trying to fit are sort of a team of 5 going to a team of 10 later this year and a team of 40 next year. But in the meanwhile, it's like job fit. God, the company's barely going to be the same. You're going to have to carry 5 hats or wear 5 hats until you wear 3, until you wear 2. Do you just have to put your model aside?
No, absolutely not. It's more important. It's more important than ever. More important than ever that you use it. It fits any size company, too large, too small. It doesn't matter. It will work for anyone. And I don't care if you're hiring somebody, then you should be using this process. I am a firm believer, and I've used it. I've worked with big companies, small companies. It works for everyone because it's about job fit. And you take that into account. This company is going to be growing. It's going to be becoming this. So you take that into account. Are you going to be on the team that wants that? If you're somebody that wants to just stay with a very small, tiny company, then this is the wrong fit for you. You should not be going for this company, but you want to be part of the team, help to make it grow. You can wear multiple hats. Those are all in the competencies. Every bit of that is in the competencies. It's 100%. You can actually know that so much more because you've got this data that you don't have to wait to get to know somebody to be able to do this. You find it out right away as soon as they take those assessments. And the Jofi assessments are cheap. I will tell you that. They're only $20 for the 3 assessments, and the more that you purchase, the less they are. So that makes it affordable. Actually, the one thing I didn't mention, I know we're basically out of time, but it was written for the military, the personality one that we're using. So a lot of the work was done already with our tax dollars. So Mercy Health was the company that validated it on the civilian side. And so Bill, the guy that I work for, actually has been using this, he's actually built the Cadillac because we've been working together for years. And, what have we learned along the way with this? And like I say, we're using it for multiple things, not just selection. But he's made it affordable. The only thing that he wants to do, he wants to, pass the word around because they're so, it makes a lot of sense. It goes back to the guy that I worked for, Tom Carroll, and really helping to keep his legacy going because what he wanted was for people to find their noble purpose in this world. And that was very genuine with him. And that's what he wanted. And that's what everybody that works with me, that's what's important to them. That's what we're trying to do is scale it to people that, to make it a difference and make a difference for people. I mean, when you enjoy what you're doing, we're all given different talents. And it's when we can bring that forward, we have a happy life. If we don't, you can be really miserable and you take it out on everybody around you without even really meaning to, just because you're not happy. So it really does make a difference in every way, shape, and form. And it's understanding people more. And there's not an interviewer out there that can actually discover what we can discover using those assessments. You just can't do it in an interview. It's impossible. So, but what you learn about somebody, then you learn where to focus your interview so that you can actually feel good about your decision. And like I say, so much is done behind the scenes with the data that you're getting that star rating that you can feel a lot more confident with that. That's where our managers got, where, they're a 3, 4, 5-star candidate. They got where that's the way they talk to us. We didn't share anything other than, your 3, 4, or 5-star candidate. And they would be, okay, that's all I want. And we got so much support from leaders because they did, they believed in it and they didn't have to worry about it anymore. They didn't have to sit there and worry so much about bringing the wrong person on the team. So it does work. It works for any size company.
Well, very cool, Julie. That time flew absolutely by. If you think $20 for a Jofi assessment is cheap, you can get Julie's book for the price of a Subway sandwich off Amazon. So just get it. And I could say it's like you said at the outset, it is not structured like classic business nonfiction, where there's little anecdotes and stories and this and that, and you're trying to prove a point in something. It is a guide. It's right on the cover, guidebook. Yeah. So it's not like you're going to have to waste a bunch of time on the fluff until you can find the detail.
Right.
It's a tool. It's with a capital T.
Yeah, it's not meant for easy reading. That's for sure.
What kinds of things would you like to do? So the folks who will listen to this will be strangely biased between Southeast Asia and Canada. That's where our largest presence is.
Okay.
So that whole collection of countries in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, and so on. And Canada, that's just because that's where our footprint is strongest and oldest.
Sure.
But besides people picking up and reading some of the things that you've put down, checking out Higher Reach and the Higher Reach Academy, are there other ways you'd like people to track you down and engage you?
I think just looking at our website, because we offer the talent acquisition support, and then the Jofi website, I think that's really important to understand what Jofi has to offer. And we are using this internationally, just so that you know. We have companies that have internet companies and other, that are using this higher reach approach, but also Jofi is designed to be able to use if you have people, it doesn't matter where you live, people are still people. We all still have personalities. That doesn't change no matter where you're born.
Oh yes. Well, as I'm a Canadian prairie boy by birth and training, let's say. I grew up on the prairies, but having lived in many countries overseas in the subsequent years, I can only agree with you. So my coalface experience on that echoes what you've said. The Higher Reach Academy, if folks are interested there, because some of our crew will be, that's what they are constantly looking at and thinking about. How are people trained? What are they learning? How do they sharpen their skills? What's the story there? People need to be?
Well, Higher Reach is really kind of exclusive to the West Michigan area, but through Jofi, we have the startup for using the evidence-based process. And so that would be actually going through either myself, I can connect them to the right people, or Metrics Reporting is who I work for. And they actually are working with like Goodwill Industries across the United States, and they're implementing this evidence-based process. So Higher Reach has been specifically for West Michigan and through this grant funding, but companies that want to do it outside of that can actually participate too. And we have different models of different ways to work with individual companies, depending on the size and scope of what would be involved.
Okay. When we share this, I think we'll take those things that you've just raised to us and just give simple links so people can do their own homework.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And follow the thread.
I think if I can say the links, it would be the JLHR Consulting website, the Jofi website, jofiscore.com, and the Metrics Reporting. And then you can go to Higher Reach to learn more about what Higher Reach is, because it's definitely some great information on there. But like I say, if it's something that's outside of the West Michigan area, right now we're not really set up to do, because we go through West Michigan Works, which is they're the ones that actually, and so it's more but Jofi is its own company. And so that's different. So that's why we can actually, we do work with other companies outside of West Michigan. So it's, so we do that, not just reporting, that's just their business. He's been around for years. So
Okay.
that makes sense.
Julie MacFarland, awesome. Just super stuff. I'm so pleased we tracked you down and had this conversation. It's good.
Well, I'm
it's
really
good
excited that
wisdom,
you gave me a
very
chance.
relevant topic.
Well, I appreciate getting the opportunity to actually share the story because I'm excited about it. It does work. The only thing that I can say about it is I've used this for everything that I've mentioned: selection, hiring, career navigation, workforce development, team building, and it works. It's not my brainchild, but I'm telling you, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. So
super. Well, have a great day there. We're going to sign off with you. We're in Singapore, and we're passing the baton.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night.